The study of cities in many ways is the study of externalities. When we bring ourselves together, we create these things we call externalities, which simply put are the things that we haven't really thought about as part of the framework for doing whatever it was we were doing in the first place. And they can be positive or they can be negative. The negative ones often have a lot to do with the environment and the resources that a city consumes. As we know, the city is accountable for 65–70% of greenhouse gas emissions today, and that number will no doubt rise. This is an externality. It's in the old language, a tragedy of the commons, in that we all do it, but no one is responsible for it. So how do we address them? The city planners needs to include this thinking, and traditionally much of this has been about pricing, saying let's put a price on it and then the market will respond. And let's value the cost of this behavior. What we've found often is that, first of all, the thinking around externalities is the most important part, saying where does this come from? What behavior are we encouraging to make this type of pollution happen? And then how do we change that? So ultimately, this is now about new norms of behavior. In fact, what we found is perhaps the most efficient way of addressing the challenge is through information. It's simply by telling the story, letting people know what is the consequences of their action. And while I should note adults perhaps are somewhat more resistant sometimes, children are actually much more open to this. So we find one of the most effective strategies is simply to start education at an early age, saying this is what it means to recycle, this is how we separate the waste, this is what water consumption is, this is how you save it, electricity, and so on and so forth. And so this has a great impact once the children start teaching the parents. And oftentimes it's simply enough to provide information, and in many cases to see that behavior will change without an economic incentive, and that that can even go so far as to encourage investments. For example, in waste management, simply telling people this is how much your daily waste consumption is, this is how much you are producing. That information alone is often enough to encourage people to, first of all, start reducing the amount of waste that they consume, that they produce, and encouraging recycling, and then also to do so more efficiently by separating packaging and dry from wet. And as a result, this then allows the trash pickup to be that much more efficient, and there's great savings to be had in a more efficient sanitation network. And ultimately, all of this can be done without, in fact, giving anybody an economic price incentive, which I think is a fascinating example of how simply paying attention to an externality can result in very positive change. I've talked mostly about environment, but this is equally true in social matters. And so whether we're talking about crime or harassment, simply allowing people, for example, to tell their stories and to do so in a positive and open way creates more transparency and ultimately can result in a better city. And that is part of the plan. That is part of what city officials are there to do.